Nina Hartley was 59 years old. She lived in a comfortable, book-filled craftsman-style home in the quiet, tree-lined streets of Berkeley, California, a world away from the neon-drenched intensity of her professional peak. The house was a reflection of her life's work, shelves groaned with texts on human sexuality, feminist theory, and political history, interspersed with tasteful art and the accumulated treasures of a long, examined life. Her annual income was a stable and respectable $300,000, a sum earned not from performing, which she now did only on rare, special occasions, but from her work as a certified sex educator, her popular speaking engagements at universities, the sales of her educational videos, and the enduring royalties from her iconic filmography. She was a legend, an intellectual, a pioneer who had not just participated in an industry but had tirelessly worked to destigmatize and intellectualize it. But the woman who now lectured at Ivy League universities and counseled couples on intimacy was a far cry from the idealistic, fiercely intelligent, and sexually curious young woman she had once been. That woman was named Marie, and her story began not in a quest for fame or escape, but in a radical, philosophical pursuit of sexual liberation. Marie grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, the daughter of two academics, a history professor and a librarian. Her childhood was one of structured intellectual curiosity, filled with debates at the dinner table and stacks of books that were her constant companions. She was a brilliant student, naturally gravitating towards the sciences, her mind sharp, analytical, and endlessly questioning. Physically, she was a classic beauty with a twist of playful sensuality. She had a compact, curvaceous figure, with a small, defined waist that curved into generous, womanly hips. Her most striking features were her large, expressive blue eyes, always sparkling with intelligence and a hint of mischief, and her full, pouty lips that seemed perpetually on the verge of a smile or a challenging question. Her breasts were full and soft, completely natural, and she carried them with a confidence that was rare for a girl in the 1970s. While her friends were swooning over pop stars, Marie was secretly reading Wilhelm Reich, Simone de Beauvoir, and the Kinsey reports, her mind ablaze with questions about the political, social, and biological constructs of sexuality. She enrolled in a prestigious nursing program, her scientific mind excelling in the rigorous curriculum. It was in a human physiology lecture that she met David, a brooding, intensely serious philosophy graduate student. He was her intellectual equal, but where she was sunny and optimistic, he was dark and cynical. Their connection was immediate and volcanic, a meeting of two powerful minds. Their debates stretched long into the night, moving from Kant to capitalism to the very nature of desire. David wasn't just her first love, he was her intellectual sparring partner. He introduced her to the works of the Marquis de Sade, arguing that true freedom lay in the absolute rejection of societal morality. Marie was captivated, not by the cruelty, but by the radical idea of sexual expression completely untethered from shame. Their relationship was a passionate, all-consuming intellectual and sexual experiment. They saw themselves as pioneers, pushing against the boundaries of their conservative upbringing. But David's philosophy began to curdle into something darker. His talk of liberation started to sound like a justification for a lack of empathy. He pressured her into sexual scenarios that felt less like shared exploration and more like performances for his philosophical validation. When she expressed hesitation, he would accuse her of being bourgeois and still trapped by patriarchal conditioning. The love affair became a cage, its bars made of complex theory and emotional manipulation. The final break came when he suggested bringing another woman into their bed, not as a mutual exploration, but as a test of her commitment to their ideals. Looking into his eyes, she didn't see a fellow revolutionary. She saw a narcissist using philosophy as a weapon. She ended it, her heart broken not by the loss of a lover, but by the shattering of an intellectual dream. Feeling adrift, she transferred to complete her nursing degree in San Francisco. The city in the early 80s was a revelation. It was alive with a different kind of sexual revolution, one that was joyful, diverse, and rooted in community, not in cold intellectual theory. She discovered the nascent adult film industry, not in the seedy underbelly David had romanticized, but in a community of artists and performers. She saw women who were not victims, but agents, who were using their bodies to create art, explore pleasure, and make a living on their own terms. It was the antithesis of David's joyless, theoretical world. It was real, messy, and empowering. She made a decision that would define her life. She would take her nursing knowledge, her fierce intellect, and her unapologetic embrace of her own sexuality, and she would enter this world not as a passive participant, but as an educator and an advocate. She chose the name Nina Hartley, Nina for its elegance, Hartley for its strength. Her first film was a conscious political act. She walked onto the set not with nerves, but with a sense of purpose. When the camera rolled, her performance was a revelation. It was joyful, confident, and intellectually engaged. Her large blue eyes connected directly with the lens, inviting the viewer not into a fantasy of submission, but into a shared celebration of sensual pleasure. She was in absolute control, a scientist and an artist conducting an experiment in human connection. The paycheck was secondary, the sense of mission was everything. The first part of her journey was an intellectual awakening and a rejection of toxic idealism. The second would be about building a lifetime of work that would bridge the gap between the bedroom and the classroom, forever changing the conversation about sex in America. Nina Hartley's career unfolded like a sustained, brilliant thesis on sexual positivity. While the industry around her veered between periods of gritty realism and glossy, commercial excess, Nina remained a constant, the intelligent, joyful, and articulate performer who could explain the biomechanics of an orgasm with the same ease she could demonstrate one on screen. She became a star not in spite of her intellect, but because of it. Directors loved her because she was a collaborator, often suggesting camera angles and narrative ideas that elevated the material. Her girl-next-door beauty, with those sparkling blue eyes and that confident, curvaceous body, made her accessible, while her fierce intelligence made her fascinating. She worked constantly, becoming one of the most prolific performers in the history of the industry. But Nina's work was never just about the work. It was a mission. She saw the rampant misinformation about sex, the STI epidemics, and the persistent shame that plagued even her most liberated colleagues. Her nursing background kicked in. She began to tirelessly advocate for on-set safety, for mandatory testing, for education. She started giving talks, first in small clubs and then at universities, her presentations a unique blend of personal anecdote, clinical fact, and unassailable logic. She was mocked by critics and dismissed by the mainstream, but she never wavered. She was building a legacy far beyond the confines of a film set. Her personal life became an extension of her philosophy. After the painful lesson with David, she was determined to build relationships based on mutual respect, clear communication, and shared values, not just intellectual or physical passion. She fell in love with and married a filmmaker, a man who was not threatened by her fame or her mind, but who celebrated both. They forged an open marriage, a conscious, consensual choice that they spoke about publicly with a refreshing honesty that baffled and intrigued the media. It was a real-life application of her beliefs about love, commitment, and personal freedom. As the years turned into decades, Nina gracefully navigated the aging process in an industry notoriously cruel to women over 30. She simply evolved. She began producing and directing her own films, creating content that was ethically produced and focused on female pleasure. She authored books, became a certified sex educator, and her speaking fee skyrocketed as institutions finally began to catch up to the ideas she had been championing for years. The girl who had been told by a lover that her hesitation was bourgeois was now a respected authority whose opinion was sought by doctors, therapists, and journalists. The true test of her philosophy, however, came with a personal crisis. Her husband, her rock and partner for decades, was diagnosed with a progressive, debilitating illness. The vibrant, active life they had built together was suddenly overshadowed by doctors' appointments and the grim prognosis. The world of open sexuality and boundless energy they had inhabited began to shrink to the size of a hospital room. Many expected her to retreat from public life, to hide this chapter away as being at odds with her image of vibrant health and sexual joy. Nina did the opposite. She spoke about it. In her lectures, she began to incorporate the challenges of maintaining intimacy and connection in the face of illness and aging. She talked about the evolution of love, from the fiery passion of youth to the deep, tender, and often difficult devotion of caretaking. She argued that true sexual liberation included the freedom to redefine intimacy, to find connection beyond the physical act, and to face mortality with the same courage with which she had faced life. She cared for him with the same fierce, intelligent love that had characterized her entire career, until his final breath. Now, at 59, Nina Hartley sits in her Berkeley home, a living testament to a life lived with radical integrity. The sparkling blue eyes now hold the wisdom of countless conversations, countless lovers, and profound loss. The famous curves have softened with age, a map of a life fully lived. Her income is a testament to her enduring relevance. Her story is not one of a young woman's corruption or a desperate escape, but a singular, 5-decade-long argument for intelligence, joy, and compassion in human sexuality. She entered the industry as a nurse and an intellectual, and she transformed it into her classroom. She proved that the most radical and lasting power is not in mere titillation, but in the fearless, unending pursuit of truth and the courageous, joyful celebration of the body and all its capacities, from the peak of pleasure to the quiet dignity of its decline. She is not just a former adult film star, she is Professor Hartley, and her life's work has been one long, revolutionary lesson.